What's up, degenerates? This is Locked In. I'm your host, Mason P. Cameron at PFF_Mason on the Twitter. And with me, as always, my partner in crime, Vishaal Gupta at Vishaal_Gupta95 on Twitter. I was out last week. I said yesterday. I was out last week. The glorious Steve Bonham stepped in for me. And I got to watch the show. You guys had a great show, but we were talking about it in the pre-show. Apparently, I'm the yapper here because our shows go so much longer than when Steve gets here. Maybe we need to get Steve in here to crack the whip a little bit. But no, all jokes aside, you guys had a great show last week. How are you doing? How you living, partner?
Doing great. Yeah, it was a very fun show with Steve. Thanks again for hopping on, but happy to have you back and happy to go over some week 4 matchups today. Should be a good time.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one because I'm actually a little bummed we didn't get to talk about last week because, you did a great show. You had a lot of really good reads that I liked too. And, we're going to break into some of the wackiness that's been going on. There's been a lot of like goofiness kind of in the league, at least for week 3. Like it always feels like this too, like where we're like, okay, we're kind of starting to get a beat for it. And then you have like Tampa Bay drop a game to Denver, whatever the case may be. So there's just a lot of wackiness going on. But the good news is as we get more games and a larger sample size, the picture continues to become more clear. And so that's definitely what I'm hoping we're going to see more of this week. I feel like we have a really good beat on the card this week, and I'm excited to break into it. But first things first, we have to break down the Thursday night game, because what else would we do if we didn't break down the Thursday night game? So for everybody, we just have to talk about this. I don't know any other way to talk about this than just kind of laughing over, Dallas wins this game 20 to New York's 15. Total on this game, about 45 points. Obviously, Giants cover plus 5.5 off of Brandon Aubrey's missed what looks like a chip. What you think about with Brandon Aubrey is he's been so automatic that like a chip shot, but I think it was still like a 50, right?
It was 51 yards, but he had never missed a 50-plus yarder so far in his career.
Right.
So it was essentially a chip shot for him until yesterday.
Until it wasn't, right. And so, he had it leak out. And for anybody that golfs, man, like I felt for the guy because I can't get my draw to look as good as his draw off the foot. And he just makes it look easy, has one get away from him and misses it. And of course, I'm sure he's hearing about it on Twitter this morning, because I saw so many there were conspiracy theories that Vegas had to fix in. And like, you guys, first off, we need to talk about who's talking to you guys in the public? Because I know you're not like listening to us, because I don't think we were on that game, or did I miss it? Yeah.
Nope, I didn't have anything for yesterday's game.
I don't think that we had anything towards this game, but who out there is telling you guys to bet Dallas on the road in a divisional game as 5.5-point favorites when they've had some very suspect, glaring issues, particularly in the running game, not only offensively, but defensively. And it's largely created huge problems for them to function. And, I wrote about it this week a little bit, but the fact of the matter is they can't survive if they're going to put everything on. Like, I get it. They paid a ton of money to Dak. They paid a ton of money to CD, and they're expecting results. But frankly, you can't expect them to do literally everything. And like, I know that even the numbers haven't like popped off the board or whatever, but they're absent a running game right now. When you become one dimensional like that, it's going to make them a lot harder. But yeah, so just an overall bit of a goofy game. What did you make of this one though, V?
Yeah, interesting game. I think your main talking point has to be with Dallas, because I don't know what anybody else expected from the Giants. This is kind of who they are. I mean, I guess you can say Daniel Jones has not been as bad as we were expecting the last 2 or 3 games, but it's still obviously not good enough to win in this league right now. So they're going to continue having these kind of games where I think maybe their defense is slowly getting better with Brian Burns and all those guys on the defensive line kind of keeping them in it for a little bit, but they just don't have, the star power and offense outside of Neighbors to really win these games or keep them, you know, put them in a chance position to win. But looking at Dallas, I mean, their offense, roster wise, is just not constructed very well right now. If you look at all these other teams, even in the NFC or both AFC and NFC, all these teams have 3, 4, multiple offensive weapons that they can rely on down in and down out to contribute and be heavy impact players. But you look at Dallas, it's really like maybe 2 guys you can trust on. It's CeeDee Lamb, and you can throw in Jake Ferguson if you want to, but I mean, that's really stretching it. Who are you counting on in terms of offensive weapons outside of those guys right now? And like everybody knew this coming into the season. It's not like this was any sort of surprise. We knew they had a terrible running back room. We knew they had no wide receivers you really liked outside of CeeDee Lamb. What is Brandon Cooks doing right now at this point in his career? I mean, nobody was expecting him to be what he once was. Jalen Tolbert's a young guy who's had some nice moments, but he's not going to be a guy that you want to go into the season hoping he's just going to emerge into a super trustworthy wide receiver too. And this is a team that has legit Super Bowl hopes inside that building, but you still come into the season looking like this offensively. Pretty unacceptable, to be honest. And I don't know if anybody should be really surprised. I mean, I think people were still expecting them to be, 3-1 at least at this point, and not necessarily getting blown out at home by the Ravens and the Saints, but they still were not going to be an overly competitive team once the playoffs came around. So, it is what it is. They're going to have to get some of these younger guys to emerge offensively and kind of plant themselves as true forces if they want to do anything. Because right now, you can't rely solely on CeeDee Lamb to be your entire offense.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And, when I talked about it earlier on in the season, and we talked a lot about Dallas, I thought Dallas could be a good team, but that also, I think, comes off the basis that I didn't really think that them being too light in the running back room was really going to affect them to this degree, but it's kind of a cascading effect. They can't run the ball. They can't stop the run. And frankly, this defense is suspect right now. I thought the defense was going to be a lot better.
The secondary, especially, I mean, Neighbors
yeah,
torched them. I mean, you
absolutely.
can't. I understand Neighbors is a phenomenal player, but he's a first-year guy in his 4th game, and you can't do anything to stop him whatsoever. I mean, that's just not going to cut it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that it's like, Rex Ryan. I mean, Rex Ryan can say whatever he wants, but he's talking about how he'd have the defense fixed or whatever. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but right now, Mike Zimmer hasn't done enough to. Mike Zimmer is very much trying to teach this defense to play an entirely new system, his kind of system, a lot of too high, and that's just not what they did before. That's not what they did. So it's tough to make that transition and expect like the exact same results. I thought they were going to make that transition a little bit better, but it has not been good for them right now. And Zimmer has a lot of things to figure out, particularly in stopping the run, because they are continuing to keep high safeties and teams are continuing to gash them because they don't really have a presence on the interior, and it takes the ball away from them, and they just struggle to get it back. It's really a tough look for them right now. It's a cascading effect. And then frankly, like this Giants team, when we talk about, I thought they were going to have a huge issue, and I think they still do have a lot of issues, but like you said, if they can get like the pass rush going, and they've started to a little bit, like they can be pretty solid if they can get the ball into Malik Neighbors' hands, because good Lord, this dude is going to be a problem in this league. And like we were definitely outspoken in criticism of Daniel Jones, and while Daniel Jones isn't like blowing the doors off, like he looks better understanding that, hey, I have a actual solid receiver to throw to, and feeds him the ball, and they look better. He looks serviceable. They can make this happen. And
he's not turning the ball over outside of week 1. He's done a much better job of holding onto the ball.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not everything. That can only get you so far, but it's at least a step in the right direction compared to what we saw last season and in week 1 this year. So I mean, there's some positives, but I mean, it's not going to be anything special going forward this year.
Exactly. They're quite a few pieces away from really making it, but that's why they're going to be one of these crafty teams, especially if you get them at home, and you're going to get one of these awkward no man's lands lines where lambs lines. This sounded super weird. These awkward lines that we talk about a lot at the 5.5 point mark, where you're really like, yeah, well, okay, might as well be 6.5 because they're going to have to win by a touchdown. So yeah, it's one of those things that is definitely a interesting bit, and we'll have to watch moving forward because these two
There's going to
teams
be
are
spots
now.
this year where you're going to want to take the Giants as a dog, even though it's going to feel uncomfortable. They're going to be good spots to take them, and we'll try to identify them as they pop up.
I completely agree. So now we get to head into the week, which I'm really excited about because we have some good games, and I'm super stoked to talk about the very first one on the list here, and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers heading into Indy to take on the Colts. And I just have to come out and say it right off the rip. I was completely wrong about Pittsburgh. They're heading into this game -2, and it could not sound sweeter. I know you got them at about -1. It looks like we can shop around and find them about -1 here, or excuse me, 1.5. Total for this game, about 40.5 points. And we're liking a few things from this. So V, which side are you banging on here?
Yeah, I'm just going to start off with Pittsburgh -1.5. I think the key for me in this one is Anthony Richardson has not looked good the last couple of weeks. I was pretty high on him coming into the year. He only played a couple games last year, but the stuff that we saw from him in those couple of games felt really special and really promising, especially for a guy who did not have a lot of game reps under his belt from college, only starting one season at Florida and then coming straight to the NFL. So a guy who clearly had a lot of stuff to work on, but still showed quite a bit of promise in his couple games last year. I was really high on him coming into 2024. He had some really, really awesome moments in week one, but the last couple of weeks have been just brutal for him. He is just not playing the position of quarterback well whatsoever. And the biggest thing is he is just not hitting his wide open receivers. He had multiple guys open last week in like the intermediate area, whether it's 15 to 20 yards down the field, and he overthrew them so badly. It was just unbelievable to watch. We're not even close. A couple of times these guys didn't even jump up to try to catch it because it was not possible to even lay a fingertip on the ball. They were just so overthrown. It's tough to see that happening. He really has to find a way to fix that because it's just not going to work in this league. And it is not going to work against this Pittsburgh defense that has been on absolute fire to start the season. Pittsburgh's defense is first in points and yards allowed. They are tied for second in fewest rushing yards allowed. If Indy cannot run the ball, they have no offense. That was their entire offense last week against the Bears. Jonathan Taylor ripped off a couple big ones, and that's why they were able to run it in. He got 2 touchdowns. Trey Sermon got another one on the ground. If they can't run the ball and you have to rely on Anthony Richardson's arm right now, it is not going to go well. On the flip side, Pittsburgh's offense has not been great, but they're doing just enough to win the games. They're not turning the ball over, and they are finishing drives with points, even though it's majority of field goals. They're still putting points up on the board on a lot of drives and not turning the ball over. So if they can continue that formula of just playing solid offensive football and then letting their defense go to work, they're going to win enough games because there's just too many quarterbacks right now who are struggling right now and playing against a defense like that, like Pittsburgh's. It's just not going to go well for them. Couple injuries to be aware of. Kenny Moore and Kwity Paye are out for the Colts, as well as DeForest Buckner, who won on IR last week. And then Jalen Warren and Alex Highsmith are out for the Steelers.
Yeah. And, like we've talked about with this Pittsburgh team, coaching has meant so much for them over the years. Mm-hmm. And that's why games like this are fairly comfortable games to take, even with the offense not blowing the doors off anybody. And yeah, their defense is absolutely phenomenal. And I was completely wrong, and that's where I was wrong in thinking that this defense could be a historically great defense, which potentially could be on track too. They're playing phenomenal. 8.7 points allowed per game, second in EPA per allowed per play, best pass rushing grade in the NFL right now. They held the Chargers like -5 or whatever. Like how do these things happen? So it's just one of these things that it's I think that if they can continue to let Justin Fields continue to instill confidence in him and just let him go out there and say, hey, just don't make backbreaking mistakes, and our defense is going to keep us in these games, and we will give you the opportunity to make plays. And they really have. So this is one of these things that, when you see how rough it's been for the Colts offensively, particularly with Anthony Richardson, like you said, it makes only enough sense that they need to lean way more on this run game. The offensive line is obviously their best unit. Jonathan Taylor is an excellent back. Continue to feed him and let your quarterback ease into it because he is still young.
Yeah.
This is only like his 8th start, right? Or his 9th start, maybe?
Not even. He played, 3 games last year, and he played 3 this
Was
year.
it 3? Okay, I thought it was either 4 or 5. I can't even remember. So, yeah. So, it's like,
he got hurt halfway through his second or third game last year. So,
yeah. So, it's like, it's one of these things that he is phenomenal when he is good. We loved watching him week 1. We talked about that incredible throw he makes in week 1, and everybody was. Normal guys cannot make that throw. That's just the thing. You have to be an incredibly talented dude. And if the game can slow down for him, he will not, can't overthrow these dudes by a country mile. It just can't happen. So they need to slow it down for him. They need to get this running game going, and they might actually figure it out. But right now, it's definitely a question because they are a net negative in the passing game. And this is not the team that you want to come up against as a net negative in the passing game because they will eat you alive with the pass rush. And Alex Highsmith is out this game. Nick Herbig, wow. He played great in just a few limited snaps. He had like 8 rushes and had a pair of sacks. So it's like, okay, you guys just
see him get a full workload this week for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So you see him get a full workload, and they just manufacture pass rushers there. It's just incredible what they do there. So all kudos to Pittsburgh. Mike Tomlin's boys are absolutely killing it, and they're going to be a team that you're going to want to probably follow around a little bit because they have 3 straight covers, 2 as favorites, 3 straight unders. I just when you can have that type of consistency, I don't know how at least from a gambling standpoint, I don't know how you shy away from a team like this. So I'm really excited to see this game. This is actually going to be a game that I'm probably going to have on like the main screen while, Red Zone plays off in the distance. But yeah, this is going to be another good one that I'm really excited to watch. The next game on the list here is another just surprise team. We live in a weird alternate universe where the Minnesota Vikings are just lights out every facet of the game right now. Minnesota at Green Bay taking on the Packers. Packers minus 2.5, 3 in some spots, roughly about 44 points. So I'm loving Minnesota in this game, and we will break into some of the stuff with obviously Jordan Love coming back potentially and things like that, which is kind of why I feel like this one is closer to that 3 as opposed to maybe, if it were for sure Malik Willis, I think this game would probably be a Minnesota laying points type game. But Minnesota just keeps getting points despite winning by multiple scores every week.
Yeah.
And Brian Flores' scheme is just so much fun to watch. It's the most fun in football you can have. Blitzes, simulated pressure, stunts, games, cover 0, like you name it all. He throws the kitchen sink at dudes, and like quarterbacks are coming up to him being like, I've never even seen half the stuff you threw at me. Like that's got to feel good as a coordinator. They blitz 51% of the time on passing down, so it really is a quarterback driven attack. They want to give these passers awkward looks that they've never seen before and pressure behind it. And they win. They win that way. Their pass rush looks good. Now, not every single guy on the pass rush is like elite, but they work in a way that is going to be making each one of them better because you just can't account for how many guys they could potentially bring on any play. They're unafraid in any facet of the game to run cover 0 and just blitz your face off. So it's a lot of fun to watch. It's got to be causing sleepless nights for passing game coordinators. And the biggest question for me in that regard is Jordan Love. Now, Jordan Love busted this team's ass when they met in week 17, absolutely busted them, like 4 big time throws. He had a huge grade. He had a fantastic game. And that was right in the midst of, Green Bay having a huge boost and playing so well to end last season. And I'm just not sure if this is the game I want to see him come back for his longevity in the season, because he's already it's been 2 weeks, right? 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So let him get some rest in. Let him continue to heal. Like, it was fairly serious looking when we all saw it on the field.
Potentially season ending, I mean.
We thought it, yeah, exactly. We all thought it was going to be season ending, and you're telling me he's back within the month. It's like, just let the guy rest. I understand this team is not in pressure right now to bring him back.
Because you won your last 2 games, you are in a spot where you can continue to, not have to rush him back.
Exactly. So, and that's one of the things is like, while I think, he could potentially be the guy, if they really, really want to win this game, like, yeah, Jordan Love, gives you the best chance. Of course, that's always the case when it's your starting passer, but you have to think with a little bit of longevity. And unfortunately, I think that might lean to them going Malik Willis. At least if I was making that decision, that's probably how I would go. But Matt LaFleur is a way smarter guy than me. He's way more tapped in. He's forgot more about football than I'll ever know. So I'm not going to sit here and question what he's going to do. But what we do have to understand is you do have to project this game potentially as Malik Willis being under center at some point or another. And if we've seen how Brian Flores has eaten young passers up, that should scare everybody. And you're telling me that we're getting points for this. So I'm all in on that. Also, just another note there. Sam Darnold had an injury scare. He should be good to go, last I read. And Jordan Addison potentially back this week as well. So that's where I'm leaning on that, V. And I know you have some takes on this one. I know you're liking the game total here. What are you seeing with this?
Yeah, I'm liking the under in this game at 43.5. We'll start with Minnesota's defense. You kind of said it all, but just a few stats here. They're allowing the second fewest points per game so far this season. They are tied for the second fewest rushing yards allowed, and they are first in sacks so far through the first 3 weeks of the season. So they're absolutely getting after it right now. They dominated Brock Purdy and CJ Stroud in back-to-back weeks. Now you're potentially playing either Malik Willis or Jordan Love coming off an injury. Probably expecting to see something similar. Defense is going to have a solid day. Obviously, you have Matt LaFleur, who has done wonders the last couple of weeks. So if there's anybody who can kind of figure out the holes in this Flores defense, it's going to be him. So it'll be interesting to see, but it's probably asking a bit too much of this offense right now to put up so many points against them. So definitely liking the under on that aspect. And then on the flip side, Green Bay's defense has also been relatively solid so far this year. They're first in takeaways and tied for fifth in sacks. And the question is, how long can Sam Darnold keep up his phenomenal start to the season? He's been pretty much flawless so far, multiple touchdowns pretty much every game, not turning the ball over, just doing a great job running that offense. But can he keep it up? And this will be a good test for him. There's some really good players on that Green Bay defense. Xavier McKinney has had a phenomenal start to his Packers career, an interception in each of the first 3 games. The rest of the defense is playing well too. One thing to watch out for, Jair Alexander popped up on the injury report today. He did not practice after practicing on Wednesday and Thursday. So he is questionable right now. And then Ivan Pace ruled out for Minnesota. But either way, I think both defenses are solid right now, and I'm not expecting a lot of points in this one.
Yeah. And, I love the shot that that Belichick took at the Jets for that one. Everybody liked Sam, but the Jets. Like, man, that's pretty
there's
funny.
a lot of people who thought he was going to go first in that draft. So, yeah, I think a lot of people did like
myself. I was one of them. So, I thought he was going to go first in that draft. And the Sam Darnold thing for me is definitely something we talk about a lot is like, as much as it's become a meme around the league of seeing ghosts, but honestly, Sam was kind of ahead of his time. He was trying to tell these teams that I don't know how you want me to progress if I can't stay off of the ground.
Right.
And it's a thing that we continue to see. And frankly, I think we're going to start seeing some pretty elite passers at the tops of drafts declining to go to certain teams. And I know that sounds unheard of, but do you think Arch Manning, when he decides to come out, do you think either Eli or Peyton are going to just let him, like, I don't know, go to a team that is just mismanaged? I don't think so. I think
we're going to start seeing it as soon as next year with Shador, but we'll also see, like, if somebody like Carolina is going to have a top, 3 or 5 pick that we're expecting, are these are these guys going to want to go there? Is Carson Beck going to want to go
Right.
there? I mean, in my lifetime, at least, I haven't seen anything like that happen. You know, the Eli Manning stuff was before my time. Obviously, the John
Right.
Elway stuff was before my time. So it's still hard to believe that it will happen just because it's not happened in any sort of recent
Sure.
modern NFL history. But it is,
These guys
interesting to
got
say
that.
the least.
These guys got that NIL money now,
Yeah,
though.
for
These
sure.
guys have that NIL money, and I don't think that they're afraid to be like, "I'll go back to school."
If they got
Like,
eligibility left, then yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, I'm right there with you. I think that this is going to be another really, really good game. Particularly because I just like watching Brian Flores call plays, man. It's so much fun. All right. Next game on the list here is one that is near and dear to your heart, I see, because we have the Chicago Bears playing host to the LA Rams. Bears -3 in this one.
Mm-hmm.
40.5 points on the total. You're liking the game total here. Tell us what you're thinking on this one.
I'm liking the over at 40.5. We'll start with the Rams defense. They have been terrible to start the year. They are allowing the second most points per game so far, the fourth most passing yards per game, and the second most rushing yards per game. They only have 4 sacks on the season, which is tied for third fewest. They're just not playing well whatsoever right now. Allowed 41 a couple weeks ago to the Cardinals, 24 last week to the Niners, allowing 3 passing touchdowns to both quarterbacks. Chicago's offense obviously has not been great to start the year, but they are slowly progressing. They are moving the ball quite a bit. Caleb Williams at 360 passing yards last week. They just got to start getting the ball into the end zone, which against this Rams defense, it feels like this is the game where you can kind of turn things around in that standpoint and finally, punch it in there. They are expected to get Keenan Allen back this week, so that should be a big boost for their offense. I think they should be able to get 2 or 3 scores in this one pretty easily. Chicago's defense, very, very good the first couple weeks of the season. Not as good last week. There were a couple holes last week. Obviously, we know Jonathan Taylor had a nice day on the ground, but there was also some room in the passing game. Like I mentioned, there was plenty of open receivers in that game. Anthony Richardson was just not able to hit them. That's not going to be an issue with Matthew Stafford coming to town. If there are open guys, he's going to find them. He's going to hit them. So it's going to be, if he has a little bit of time, he's going to be able to make some plays. I think they're not going to do too much offensively, I think, because they still have so many injuries, Puka, Cooper, and all those guys on the offensive line. But I think they can get to 17, 20 points. And then if Chicago can also get 20 plus points, I think there's going to be a slight over in this one.
Yeah. The big thing is obviously for the Bears has been like protection. And it goes into what we just talked about where, I think Caleb Williams is a stellar quarterback. And right now it feels like he's surviving on his own and taking 13 sacks in 3 games. And when we look at the Rams, like you said, the Rams have been atrocious in the secondary. And this week the Bears are going to get Keenan Allen back, to absolutely decimate Quentin Lake in the slot. I think that that's going to help Caleb get the ball out. And granted, when we look at the Rams, they're not really like a huge team in generating sacks. I think they only have like 4 when I last checked. But they are a top 10 pass rush win rate team. So when we look at that, you have to question if they're going to be able to hold up in pass pro. But even still, Caleb Williams has been like last week, he had some yardage after really not having much, pretty much of anything in the first 2 games. And he's still throwing quite a few turnover worthy plays and things like that. But man, keep him off the ground and they can really do well. And hopefully getting back Keenan Allen is going to help that. Just having an option that can separate quickly in the slot is going to do a lot to help him just rip the ball out and put trust in his guy to make a play, because that's kind of what they have to do right now because they just aren't protecting well. So I'm right there with you. I think that over 40.5 is definitely doable for sure because Stafford isn't just not going to miss those throws. He's just not going to.
We saw it last week. He's out there with guys like Tutu Atwell, DeMarcus Robinson. He's still throwing bombs down the field, against a good Niners defense. So
yeah, he does not care. He's like, I'm gonna rip it.
For sure.
Stafford's so much fun to watch. Okay. The next game we have on the list here is another interesting one, a little foreshadowing from earlier when we were talking about Tampa dropping to the good old Denver Broncos. But here we have Philly on the road as a 1.5 point favorite taking on the Bucks. this is a goofy line. And that's why it's so like flowing in a lot of different directions. You can get this anywhere from +2.5, -1, depending on which side you're going to. 42.5 points on the game total. What's your take on this one? We saw Denver come in, take down Tampa Bay, but frankly, I didn't actually know this until a colleague of mine, Trevor Sycamore over at PFF, actually looked into it. Tampa Bay Trev, old beat writer for the Bucks there. Todd Bowles actually, I guess, has a long history of issues of overcoming Sean Payton, which is just the trend or like stat that I just, wasn't quite expecting, but it's a pretty thorough thrashing through most of it.
Yeah.
And frankly, when we look at this game, I think it's just an overcorrection on the public that sharps are taking advantage of. Only 55% of the tickets in this one are on Philly, but 69% of the cash is on Tampa. So which way are you leaning in this one, V?
Yeah, I was having a tough time figuring out the spread in this game because I think there's just so many injuries on both sides of the ball, and neither team has really
Yes.
been super consistent. So I'm going to go on the game total in this one and take the under at 42.5. We'll start with Philly's offense. They are pretty banged up right now. We saw the hit that Devontae Smith took last week. He's already been ruled out for this game. A.J. Brown and Lade Johnson were limited on Friday. That was the first time they practiced all week, and they are questionable. So it'll be very interesting to see if they can go. But if you don't have A.J. Brown and you don't have Devontae Smith, you really don't have a lot going on in your passing game. It's just going to be, Dallas Goedert and, I don't know, Jahan Dotson might finally become, a force in this offense. Maybe he might get some snaps for once, but that's not a great offense that you want to throw out there. It would just be a ton of Saquon Barkley. So that's going to be interesting to see. And, outside of the running game, even with Devontae Smith in there, this offense has not done much. Last week, they had no passing offense outside of a couple monster plays to Dallas Goedert, and those are not plays you can really count on going on every week. It's just you can't count on defenders picking themselves like as badly as New Orleans did last week on that 3rd and long. So I don't know what this Philly offense is going to look like with so many injuries. On the flip side, Tampa Bay's offense, they had a great start to the season in week 1 where they put up 40-plus points, but the last couple of weeks they've really come back down to earth. They've scored a total of 27 points in their last 2 games. Baker has been sacked 12 times in the last 2 games. Tough to watch. The offensive line is not holding up. And now he's going up against a Philly defensive line that really put it together last week. Jalen Carter looked phenomenal. I kind of talked about it with Steve last week that I was disappointed in this Philly defense, especially because I was not seeing a lot out of these highly drafted defensive players in the first or second round, whether it's Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, or any of those guys. Jalen Carter shut me up last week. He had a monster performance, and now he gets a chance to go through this Tampa line that does not look very good right now. So I'm just not sure what either offense is capable of doing right now because of how they've looked and how injured they are. A couple injuries for Tampa. Kalijah Cansey and Antoine Winfield Jr. have been ruled out, and then Vita Vea is questionable. That one's a big one. If Vea can play and stuff up that D line and stop Barkley, then this is definitely going to go under, in my opinion.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I think it's definitely going to come down to is that I feel like Philly is just slightly more injured, or I shouldn't say slightly more injured, because Tampa had a lot. If you go look up Tampa's injury list report right now, it is a laundry list. It is huge. But a lot of those guys were able to come back and put some limited practices together or put some practices together. You have some questions, though. You had Mike Evans, who limited practice pretty much all week, and then DNP at the end of the week. So you're hoping that might just be like rest. I think they did list it as rest, but you just want to hope that the knee's okay. Chris Godwin, limited in practice all week. The issue for me, though, has to be with Philly. If Tampa can put both of these receivers out there, they're going to have a tough time. The Eagles, they did perform better last week, but I still definitely have some huge questions. You are right. Jalen Carter must have read my piece where I said he had like one of the lowest run defense grades in the NFL or something like that, because he definitely picked it up pretty much in every aspect. I take credit, but it was really probably the shot to the arm that he got from the coaching staff about, being not getting to start the game or whatever the other week. So, I still do have some questions with this defense. And if you're telling me that Devontae Smith going to be out, and A.J. Brown didn't practice all week, but came back to a limited practice on Friday. I don't know how long the hamstring is going to hold up.
Yep.
We talk about this a bunch. The hamstring is the most nagging injury that football players can deal with. And it seems like sometimes they'll, put together a couple good days and then they'll go out on Sunday, play 3 snaps and pull the hammy again. And that seems a little bit like what we might get with A.J. Brown. Now, if A.J. Brown is on the field, they can look a lot better, and this game is going to be a lot closer. There is a ton of injury issues. I think that Tampa just getting points at home, though, is just such an overcorrection, because this Philly team, while they looked better last week, have had a lot of struggles in certain aspects.
They only scored 15 points. I mean, they won, but that's not like they looked great.
Right. They didn't look great, but it's like they've looked better in aspects that they were like very, very bad in early. So it's one of those things that I'm not sure that they can be laying points on the road to anybody right now, frankly. So take the points, and we'll see you in the morning, I guess.
Yeah.
So next game on I can't help but laugh about this one. 3 weeks ago, I would have never expected to be taking this line, and here I am. We're taking Carolina, baby. Bengals headed into Carolina to take on Andy Dalton's Panthers, and wow, what a change. So Cincinnati, another team that I'm slightly confused, is going to continue to lay points on the road. I know they've been playing better, but they're going to be -4.5 here on the road against a Carolina, the team that looked like a new team. They looked entirely new. 47.5 or 46.5 roughly on the total here. And I know I've gone mad. I know it. But this turnaround is just monumental. And I like taking Carolina here at home and the points because it's been insane. They went from being the lowest EPA in the league offense by a wide margin in the first 2 weeks. Last week, they had a top 6 EPA per play on offense. It's an incredible turnaround. And literally, it's all because they can protect Andy Dalton. And I think a lot of, it's tough because Bryce Young was very clearly the issue for this team early on. And while they're not overly strong, they aren't the most talented roster by any means. And it's something that we talked about for a while. They made a really ballsy decision to sit him down because he was the issue with their offense as of right now. And right now, Andy Dalton is making guys look a lot better than they maybe are. He looks as we were talking about this in the pre-show, V, and I had to stop myself because I want to talk about this right now. He looks the most comfortable he's ever looked in his entire career right now behind this Carolina offensive line, who is playing out of their mind, by the way. They themselves the Carolina as a whole only allowed 2 sacks last week, but just 5 pressures. Just 5 pressures. It's insane. That's one of the best games of the season so far. And when you look at them just as a whole, just the offensive line. Now, some of that's actually been from their tight ends. Some of their tight ends have been who's giving up most of this pressure, but Carolina's offensive line, best pressure rate in the league, 12.1%. Best pass block efficiency rating, 93.5. Fewest total pressures. This offensive line has given up just 14 pressures in 3 games. That's phenomenal. We do have to say the questions, though, with this offense in terms of Deontay Johnson, questionable. And he had a great game last week.
Awesome game.
Adam Thielen out. I can't remember. Was it a hamstring? He hit the IR, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So, and that was a surprise, I think, last week where, you know what? Maybe that's a smart move by Carolina. You have an aging player instead of being wishy-washy, which kind of like we just talked about with the Eagles, where, A.J. Brown might be forcing himself back too quick. You never really know because he didn't practice all week and then was limited this week, trying to see if the hammy can go. It's like, just let these dudes rest until they know they're good. Because you're going to continue to have this issue all week if you try to force them back. So I think that that's a smart move by them. This is an Xavier Legette game.
I was just going to say that, yep.
Over 35.5 yards. Go hit it. I mean, that seems like a shoo-in, even not with any real great games. He's getting up over that line or right to it pretty much every time. So I think that that's going to be comfortable. He's an extremely talented player. And Andy Dalton trusts him, man. I saw the craziest throw when I went back watching tape. This man, Andy Dalton, is a wizard right now. He threw through the tiniest window between two middle defenders to Xavier Legette. Like, it was just nothing. He just flicked it. He looked effortless. He did not look worried at all. And ball just floated into this tiny window. Legette's right there. That's what you need between these guys. Comfort, security, and the ability to trust each other. And that's what they look like. And I think that I'm excited to watch this team play. I really hope that they make me eat crow. This is the season of Mason eating crow about all these teams that I thought really weren't going to do anything, but then they adjust and they show what maybe they can adjust.
But to be fair, I mean, this was an adjustment nobody was expecting because nobody knows what they did. So I don't think it's on us. I mean, if we knew Andy Dalton was going to start even a handful of games this year, I think everybody's tune would have been different.
Exactly. Even if we knew he was going to start and play this well, I think the biggest thing too is like when you have an offensive line that's playing as well, especially in pass protection that Carolina's is, like it changes the entire team. The interior of that offensive line was very, very poor last year, so you couldn't put everything on Bryce because he was getting his ass kicked. But now he's not. That's not the issue anymore. So I like to see it. I can't wait to see this thing. And then when you just talk about Cincinnati, like defensively, they're not very good right now. They're actually fairly atrocious. And the coverage is not great. They're not getting a ton of pressure outside of Cam Taylor-Britt. Like, I know that he's the one who got caught like talking trash last week, but
the last couple weeks, I mean, he cannot put his mouth right now. This dude needs to, he made a nice pick against Kansas City, but he needs to, shut up a little bit and just play football.
Yeah, exactly. He needs right now. He needs to chill just a little bit. And I mean, he's the only like semi-serviceable. Well, I shouldn't say semi-serviceable. He's played decently well, but the entire defense is just falling apart at the seams. And while they're making some strides offensively, T. Higgins comes back. Jamar Chase has a huge game after, getting really pissed off on the sideline in week 2. So we have a situation where, they're a good offense, but this defense right now is a net negative, and it is going to be an issue. And I think you could even put it 47.5 is a little bit higher than I was hoping to take it. It looks like you might be able to get it in 46.5 in some spots, but like there's probably going to be some points in this game. And I think Carolina is going to be in it. So take those points. They're at home. I think they're going to play a lot better. And while they might not blow the doors off of Cincinnati, this is going to be a closer game, and you're going to want those points. So I'm liking it. Is there anything else that you're seeing about this team, partner, or anything you're seeing about the Bengals?
Well, I think their offense was really, really good last week. They didn't turn the ball over. They didn't punt or anything last week, so they did their job. It's going to be curious to see that matchup against this Carolina defense because they played well last week, but it is the Raiders, so I don't know how much you can take away from that. So that's really what I want to see. What can this Carolina defense do? Because if this Carolina defense can even put up half decent performance, they're going to be interesting. Like going forward, this is a team that we just wrote off to start the season, but they can make some noise if maybe their defense can step up a little bit.
I said they were going to be historically bad. I said that they were going to be on their way to being historically bad. And then that's why this is a phenomenal change because like it was, incredible. So that's enough on that one. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop talking up the Panthers so much. We have another good game here with another pair of teams that are just turned, or Arizona, dropped one, but they've been pretty good to start the year. But this Commanders team comes out of nowhere and absolutely I shouldn't say blows the doors off, but they played potentially their best offensive game of the year in the Cliff Kingsbury system, which, we like to talk about a little bit, but Washington heads into Arizona. Arizona, about 3.5-point favorites. I think that's a pretty solid spot for this line, to be frank. 49.5, 48.5 is roughly the game total here. Which side are you leaning on this one?
Yeah, I am liking Arizona minus 3.5 in this one. I know Washington looked phenomenal last week. It's one of the best offensive performances you're probably ever going to see. Also no punts, no turnovers, 90% completion percentage for Shaden Daniels. Just a great all-around game from them. But, let's go back to what we said about Cincinnati's defense just a moment ago. They have been really, really bad so far this year. They got no pressure in that game against Shannon Daniels. He had plenty of time in the pocket to just roam around and do whatever he wanted. It's not going to be the same against this Arizona defense that has been, I think, quite a bit better than we were all expecting coming into the season. They've held their last two opponents to 30 total points. That includes just 20 points for a Lions team that we were expecting to be one of the more explosive offenses in the league. They sacked Goff a couple times last week and had one interception. Probably should have had a second one, but there was an interesting whistle at the 2-minute warning in the first half last week that took away a pick six. But they still had a nice overall day against Goff in the passing game. They sacked Stafford 5 times the week before that, getting plays out of guys that I don't think a lot of us have really ever heard of or know too much about. So they're getting good performances out of a lot of their guys. And then Buda Baker has returned to being an absolute beast. I think he had a couple injuries the last few years that have slowed him down. He's back to full force right now. He is making plays all over the field. He's once again that leader on that defense. And if he can continue to do what he's doing, this is going to be at least an average to above average defense. On the flip side, Arizona's offense was terrific the first couple of weeks of the season, 28 points in week 1, 41 points in week 2. Kyler was looking great, and then obviously you had Marvin Harrison Jr. come along the last couple of weeks, 3 total touchdowns, just making giant plays down the field, being everything you were hoping he would be with the top 5 pick in the draft. Washington's defense has allowed the 3rd most points per game so far this year. They have allowed the 2nd most passing yards per game, and they're tied for the 3rd fewest sacks, and they only have 1 takeaway so far. You would think that would be the worst in the league, but that's actually Jacksonville, who has 0 takeaways. If you go on Pro Football Reference, it doesn't even say 0. It's just an empty space under takeaways next to Jacksonville. It's pretty sad. But yeah, Washington's defense, not very good right now. I think, obviously their offense looked great, but I still don't know if you're going to trust a rookie quarterback to win in a shootout or even cover in a shootout performance every single week. So I'm going to take Arizona, who's playing well on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I completely agree right there. I think I'm not even afraid of the hook there either.
No.
One thing that is going to be a huge difference between, Washington's opponent last week. That doesn't even sound like a tongue twister. In Cincinnati, but when you look at what Buda Baker's been able to do and what the Commanders are going to want to do in their screen game, that's his type of game, man. He's a guy that can come up and help them there, and he's also going to read his keys and not let balls get behind him. And that was a huge issue last week when Cincinnati just, did not know how to cover out there. So yeah. I'm right there with you. I think Arizona, and I don't know if you watched it or if I have way too much time on my hands, but I'm just such a fan of players doing the vlogging thing. And Kyler had a vlog come out like right before go check it out. It's pretty good. Kyler had a vlog come out like right before the game, or I think it came out after. It came out this week, but it was like before that game. Mm-hmm. And you know what, man? This dude is locked in.
Yep.
And he looks good, and he is focused, and I think he's poised to have a good season here. And while they didn't, show out last week, I think they're going to keep having a really good time against some of these opponents that are a little bit more suspect, like Washington has been.
Yeah, so for sure.
I agree with you completely. The next game on the list, another one in the late slot here. We have Kansas City as 7-point favorites, full 7-point favorites against the LA Chargers. There's just, the game total for this one is 40. We'll just go there. I'm on the under, guys. Shocker. When we talk about what's happening right now with Kansas City, I don't even know what to make of it. They win close games against, what we would expect to have been good teams to start the season, and they're winning these close games. Mahomes isn't playing all that well. He's had quite a few turnover-worthy plays. Doesn't matter. They just keep winning. The defense, while they're still good, they have great players. They're still kind of like middle of the road in anything. They're not like blowing anything out of the water. They're like 15th in EPA per play. They're like 15th in scoring. Doesn't matter. They just keep winning. Why? because they have the best foundation in the league. They have the widest margin for error because Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo, Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones, like these guys have built a foundation there that is just going to be hard for other teams to beat. And I don't think that we're going to see most teams really be able to like hang with them in that sense. Like teams hang with them, but at the end of the game, that doesn't matter because they're just going to go ahead and push past you. And that's just not this Chargers team right now. Like we talked about, -5 yards last week in the second half. How does something like that happen? Like, how does that? When I saw that, I had to double take and make sure that I wasn't watching like a highlight from San Diego State or something like that. Like, it was literally bad, and I don't even know how San Diego State is balling out this year. So correct me if I'm wrong. If anybody out there is a big pro San Diego State, but what's happening? How does something like that happen? Injuries is one thing, but to completely just not show up for the second half of a game, I don't know how you can trust a team, even with 7.5 points potentially at home. And injuries are just too much to overcome for them right now. Joey Bosa, Joe Alt, Justin Herbert, Rashawn Slater. That's 4 of the biggest players on their team who are either out or questionable for this game. And then you have Derwin James, who is suspended for yet another player safety violation. I know that there's conspiracies of like, oh, who's on the schedule. Maybe he should. This isn't the first time. We talked about Derwin James for like years now. This kind of tends to be his calling card. And yeah, he's an aggressive safety, but dude, this isn't helping your team right now. So I was really disappointed to see that, he got suspended for yet another type of thing like this. The defense, however, is still very strong. Even without Derwin, even with some of their injuries, they've been fantastic. I think they're like second in EPA per play allowed. So they have still been very good defensively. It really goes all the way throughout the unit. 3 straight 40 or less point unders in this game. So, I mean, take that for what you will, but I think that 40, even with how, sort of middle of the road Kansas City's been, I think that they'd have to hit pretty much 35 of this for this to really, really come into range. So I got to see way more from the Chargers before I can really trust them with a total that's anywhere near 40. Like if I was setting this total, it'd have been like 37 points because they are not looking great right now after the last week's performance. And they just frankly haven't been overwhelming offensively. They were running the ball pretty well to start off, and it's just kind of like gone off the rails a little bit because their offensive line is banged up. So that's what I'm seeing in this one, Parter. Are you set me straight? Am I anything I'm not seeing on this one? What are you seeing with this at all?
Yeah, this is just one I'm staying away from. Just again, you mentioned it, just too many injuries for Los Angeles, and you just don't know how they're going to overcome it. I mean, it's even when they were on the field last week, Slater and Alt were getting just destroyed by TJ Watt and the rest of that Pittsburgh D line. So I mean, it's without them, like we're putting in backups now. I can't imagine it getting any better. I think it's going to be quite a bit worse too. So it's just not a good look for that offense. I don't know really what they're going to do. I hope they don't throw Herbert out there. Like I know he played last week, but he got hurt. Now you want to put him in there with banged up tackles on both sides of the ball, and now going against Chris Jones and that defensive line. I mean, I don't know. It's just I don't even know who they're fielding out there offensively. So it's just something I'm going to stay away from altogether. I don't think this is going to be a very pretty game for either team.
It's going to be an ugly one, which is why I love the under here. I hit under on this one and made a face like this. Ugh. Because I know it's going to hit, but it's going to be an ugly game. So I definitely agree with you. While I want to see this Chargers team do a little bit better because it's kind of fun, see Jim out there. I love his weekly quips of, he makes a headline every week about one of his just out there dad quips or whatever. And I just like hearing them, and we're not going to hear them if they don't like win games. So I kind of want to hear more of that, but this isn't the week for that.
Nope.
So we made an exception this week because usually we've been trying to keep some of our Sunday night and primetime stuff into the Discord. I think we might move more to putting some of the picks, strictly in there, but this is going to be an exception this week because we wanted to talk about this game. I know we wanted to talk about this game. We have the Sunday night game, Buffalo heading into Baltimore to take on the Ravens. Baltimore laying 2.5 points, game total on this one, 46.5. I know that you're leaning on Buffalo on this one, V.
Yep.
As am I. Go ahead and lay it out there.
Yeah, taking Buffalo 2+2.5 in this one. I think it's just too hard to pass up on Josh Allen being an underdog. It's something we don't see very often, and we're, to be honest, not going to see very often going forward either because he's just too good of a quarterback. As an underdog, Josh Allen has 18-9-2 against the spread, like 65% hit record. So it's he's very, very good. He doesn't lose a lot of football games, and he definitely likes to cover when he is a dog. This Buffalo offense has been on absolute fire through the first 3 weeks of the season, leading the league in points per game at 37.3 points per game. Unbelievable. And that's despite them being in the middle of the pack in total yards gained. They're not really, in the top 10 in either rushing or passing, but they've just been so efficient so far because they've only turned the ball over once so far this season. So they are doing a great job taking care of the ball. And when they do have the ball, they are putting it into the end zone no matter what. So phenomenal stuff from them. Baltimore's defense has not been great so far through 3 weeks. They're allowing the 8th most points per game and then most passing yards so far through 3 weeks, but they are allowing the fewest rushing yards per game. So this could be another huge Josh Allen game if Baltimore cannot do anything against the pass, which is pretty disappointing. I feel like they have a lot of good players in the secondary. They're just not really playing well so far. For Baltimore, their offense really bounced back last week, but can they keep it up against a Buffalo defense that has been also very good so far? They're allowing the 7th fewest points per game, the 8th fewest passing yards per game, but they are middle of the pack in run defense. They are tied for the 3rd most takeaways. I think the key in this one is going to be what can Baltimore's rushing attack do against this middling Buffalo run defense. If you can get Derrick Henry and Lamar going on the ground, they could have another good performance like they had last week. But if they're down and they're behind or whatever, you have to rely on the passing game, which hasn't looked very good so far, then I think it's going to be another Buffalo win in this one. Buffalo does have a couple injuries with Terrell Bernard and Taron Johnson being ruled out, but they've dealt with injuries the last 2-3 years, and they have been totally fine. So not overly concerned about that. Can't pass up Josh Allen as an underdog.
Yeah. And, one of those things that you said too is like with Baltimore, and they're up there in run defense. I mean, it's at this point, it's like, why run the ball against them? They give up yardage through the air fairly easily. And you go and look at some of the teams, like they played Dallas last week. Like Dallas has been I don't want to hammer too much on Dallas because we already literally talked about Dallas at the top of the show, but that's kind of where the numbers like lend themselves to. You don't necessarily have to. And honestly, I think that this could still be a huge James Cook game. Like, let this guy go. He is one of their, maybe the best weapon they have on offense. I mean, that's probably not like too far out there, but
I think the great thing about Buffalo is that they have so many guys out there that you don't really need to, single out any single one player. They're just all playing so well that you can just point to anybody, and it's a collection right now.
Josh is putting the ball where it needs to be, and not to mention that they're scripting games at the beginning. I can't wait to see their first 3 plays. Every week, their first 3 plays are so interesting to me. Yeah. They had one where they came like 2 inches from getting James Cook on a wheel. Like, I don't think it was last week. I think it was week 2. They had 2 inches from getting him on the wheel on like the 2nd or 3rd play, I think. And he would have just taken it to the house. It would have been a house call. They were so lost in translation.
They had another wheel one last week that I think just barely missed to Cook, but that's after they were already up by like
right. So I love seeing what they're scripting up right now. So when you tell me that I'm getting points against a Baltimore team that frankly has largely struggled, while they played really well last week, they kind of fell apart in the 4th quarter and almost let Dallas back into that game. Yeah. When you see that they've only covered 1 game this season, and it was last week's game.
Yeah.
I don't know. Or was it last week's game? Yeah, it was last week's game. Buffalo's just too strong. Like you said, on both sides of the ball, to get nearly 3 points, that's just insane. They're top 5 EPA per play on both sides of the ball. They've just been phenomenal. So these teams together have combined for 5 overs in 6 games. The only game that didn't go over was the Buffalo-Miami game where Tua got hurt. So, and Buffalo scored over 30. So it's not like they didn't do their part. I think that this one is frankly going to be a pretty shoo-in to get 46.5 points. For it to only be 46.5, I think is actually also a huge value. I think you could have seen this game leak up towards the 48.5 range, 40 or 48.5 range. So when you can get it here at 46, I think that that's a shoo-in because it's not like Baltimore is a complete net negative offensively. Like they absolutely gashed the ground game last week. And if you can get another like performance like that from Derek, they're starting to realize. I know that John Harbaugh said, we didn't draft Derrick Henry to give him the ball 30 times a game, but you might as well because he's doing pretty good when you keep feeding him the rock. So what are we doing here?
He's a guy who needs consistent touches. You can't just give him a couple carries in the first half, then a couple carries in the second half, and hope it works out. He needs the ball to continue wearing down those defenses.
He is like that vintage Adrian Peterson where it was like he's going to hit 3 pretty much all the time. He's going to hit 1 here. He's going to get 4 here, 5 here, 3 here. And then he's going to bust one off for 60. Yeah. And then he's going to get 4 here and he's going to get 6 here. And then he's going to bust one off for 25. Like that's what they have to focus on if you're Baltimore. And that's the only way you're going to continue. You got to control the ball because right now, if you're giving the other team the ball with how the secondary's been playing, you're just not going to be able to keep up. So that's where I'm at with it. I think 46.5 is a really good one. That's why we're leaning over here. And like I said, we are both liking Buffalo plus 2.5.
All day.
That's going to be like the easiest one you get all week. So that about does it for us though, partner. It was another good show. That's all of our games on the week, but everybody who's tapped in, make sure you check us out. ImportantNonsense.com. That's how you get into our Discord. That's where all the action happens. We put more bets in there. We can break down any games that you guys want to hear about, all of your tickets, and not to mention all the fantasy guys are in there. So you can bug them about your lineups and your trades. And you know what? It's going to be a good season. I have a really good feeling about this week right now. I'm excited for football this week. So that wraps us up for week 4. Back same time next week, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Like I said, check us out, ImportantNonsense.com, become a member. And yeah, I think that about does it, V. You have any parting words for the folks at home?
Just like what you said, make sure to hop into the Discord. We got a couple picks from Monday night that I'm going to be putting in there that we didn't talk about today. So if you want to see those, definitely hop into the Discord and check out the betting channel. But yeah, everybody enjoy. Week 4 should be a good one. Should be tons of fun. Should be lots of money to be made.
Yeah, I can't wait, partner. Until next time, everybody, good night. Good luck.